Assalamualaikum. Hi, we are from Group 8 and we are going discuss about language acquisition part 2. This is content from um, our members is Muhammad Jihad Akbar and me Muhammad NurFazri, and the last is Muhammad Revinanda Rahayu. Okay, the first material will be explained by me. Okay, let's begin. Knowing more than one language. What is your mind when you hear the term or sentence? Knowing more than one language. Some people will interpret the sentence that someone who is proficient in the field of language or someone who is able to master many language or more than one language or two language. Do you think like that? Okay. According to Roger Bacon, he who understands grammar in one language understands it in another language as far as the essential features of grammar are concerned. The fact that it can't speak or understand other language is due to the diversity of words and their various form. But this is an unintentional nature of grammar. Okay, I'm going explain about childhood bilingualism. Okay, before it, what is the bilingualism? Okay, the bilingualism is the use of two or more languages by language speakers or by a language community. Okay, bilingualism and bilingual have a difference. A little difference. Bilingualism is a condition in which a person masters two or more language, but bilingual is a person mastering two or more language. In this era, is almost all people are bilingual. It is very difficult to find a monolingual people. Monolingual is century still exists, maybe in remote tribes who still use one language. Bilingual example, community Sundanese, our language mother, they are language Sundanese. Jadi contohnya itu orang Sunda kan bahasa ibunya adalah bahasa Sunda. Nah, ketika anak mereka sekolah ke SD atau mereka bergaul dengan orang yang luar Sunda dan konteks masih orang Indonesia, mereka harus menggunakan bahasa Indonesia. Jadi so they have two language, but okay, bilingual still in debate. Many people has mean for it. What meaning is actually for bilinguals? There are several opinions about bilinguals that the bilingual is a person who has the ability that is fluent in both the language of her. Will however, you need to know that bilingual it doesn't have it doesn't have to equal like fluence move in mastering the language. Okay, childhood bilingualism. In the literature, there are four types of bilingualism. The first is bilingualism baby, the second is period of childhood and teenagers, and the last is bilingualism adults. But in here, I will focus on discussing the bilingual period of childhood. Many studies early on bilingualism focused on the fact that the children of bilingual sometimes mixing the two languages in a sentence are the same, such as that's illustrated in the example below children bilingual French English. In the first example, the word friends appears in an English sentence, and the two instead the other. All the words are the language of English, but the syntax is the language of friends. Okay. There are two types of bilinguals for this case. The first is bilinguals in a row. The parents decide to set the first base of knowledge in the language of the first language, or L1, in the children day on their children. Children can then communicate in one language before they start educating their children in the second language. The second language, or L2, is usually introduced when a child is 3 years old. At the time of this child saw the development of linguistics that's good. The second is simultaneous bilingual. People older or the parents who decide to talk with the child, they are in both languages since birth, and so raise the child they in two languages at once. To be successful in this method, parents must be fluent in both language, and they must use both language when speaking to children without compromise, and this can be special challenge when speaking as a minority mother tongue with children. Okay, the next material is theories of bilingual development. I have a question for this material. Did the bilingual child start with only one grammar that was finally differentiated, or did he build a separate grammar for each language from the start? Okay, that's interesting to learn. Hypothesis system unit theory say that the child at first just built a lexicon and a grammar language. The presence of greeting mix like that just given often don't support a hypothesis of this. In addition, in the early stage, bilingual children often have words for certain objects in only one language. For example, a child bilingual Spanish and English might know the word Spanish. The Spanish is leche, and the meaning in English is milk, but not a word language English. Or he might have said the water in English, but no agua in Spanish. The type mutually complementary is also being taken as a support for the idea that a child only has one lexicon. However, examination of vocabulary words children bilingual reflect that even though they may not have the words are exactly the same in both languages, there are quite a lot of overlap to make the idea of the lexicons single didn't get in any sense. The reason children may not have a set of words together in both languages is that they use two languages. They are in situation that is different and acquire vocabulary words. And the last material is two monolinguals in one head. Okay, why is there a term two monolinguals in one head? Although we have to learn, a lot of children are bilingual to reach the conclusion that centrally that the evidence that was collected, as far as it seems to support the idea that children compose many grammar language since the beginning. Besides that, it seems children are bilingual develop grammar language. They are in a long and line that is the same with the children of the language. And then why? Okay, I will give you example. Children bilingual Spanish English young dropped the suffix said working language of English but not the Spanish. Our bilingual German English eliminates inflection prevail in the language English and use the infinitive in the language German. Result like this have directed some researchers to suggest that of a view of the manufacturing procedure language children bilinguals as two language single in the head. Okay, that's all from me. The next material will be explained by Revin. Thank you.
The verse, the role of input. One issue that concerns researchers studying bilingualism as well as parents of bilingual children is the relationship between language input and proficiency. What role does input play in helping the child to separate the two languages? One input condition that is thought to promote bilingual development is une personne, unilingue, or one person, one language. As in, mom speaks only language A to the child, and dad speaks only language B. The idea is that keeping the two languages separate in the input will make it easier for the child to acquire each without influence from the other. Another question is, how much input does a child need in each language to become native in both? Atau, berapa banyak input yang dibutuhkan seorang anak dalam setiap bahasa menjadi asli di keduanya? Jawabannya tidak praktis. Tampaknya secara intuitif jelas bahwa jika seorang anak mendengar 12 jam bahasa Inggris sehari dan hanya 2 jam bahasa Spanyol, ia mungkin akan mengembangkan bahasa Inggris jauh lebih cepat dan lengkap dari Spanyol. Some may hear one language more than the other but still have sufficient input in the two languages to become native in both. Some may ultimately have one language that is dominant to a lesser or greater degree. For practical purpose, the rule of thumb is that the child should receive roughly equal amount of input in the two languages to achieve native proficiency in both. Next, cognitive effect of bilingualism. Another issue is the effect of bilingualism on intellectual or cognitive development. Does being bilingual make you more or less intelligent, more or less creative, and so on? Historically, research into this question has been fraught with methodological problems and has often been heavily influenced by a prevailing political and social climate. Many early studies before the 60s show that bilingual children did worse than monolingual children on IQ and other cognitive and educational tests. The result of more recent research indicate that bilingual children outperform monolinguals in certain kinds of problem solving. Also, bilingual children seems to have better metalinguistic awareness, which refers to a speaker's conscious awareness about language rather than of language. Whether children enjoy some cognitive or educational benefit from being bilingual? Nah, pertanyaannya, Apakah anak-anak menikmati manfaat kognitif pendidikan bilingual? Tampaknya sebagian tergantung pada faktor ekstralinguistik, seperti sosial dan posisi ekonomi kelompok atau komunitas anak, situasi pendidikan, dan prestasi relatif dari kedua bahasa. Studi yang menunjukkan sebagian besar efek positif, misalnya, kinerja sekolah yang lebih baik, umumnya melibatkan anak-anak dibesarkan dalam masyarakat di mana kedua bahasa dihargai dan yang orang tuanya tertarik dan mendukung perkembangan bilingual mereka. Thus, is L2 acquisition the same as L1 acquisition? With some exception, adults do not simply pick up a second language. It usually requires conscious attention, if not intense study and memorization to become proficient in a second language. Again, with the exception of some remarkable individuals, adult second language learners do not often achieve native-like grammatical competence in the L2, especially with respect to pronunciation. They generally have an accent and they make syntactic or morphological errors that are unlike the errors of children acquiring their first language, L1ers. For example, L2ers often make word order errors, especially early in their development, as well as morphological errors in grammatical gender and case. L2 errors may fossilize so that no amount of teaching or correction can undo them. Unlike L1 acquisition, which is uniformly successful across children and languages, adults vary considerably in their ability to acquire an L2 completely. Beberapa orang adalah pembelajar bahasa yang sangat berbakat dan yang lain tidak memiliki harapan yang sama. Kebanyakan orang jatuh dan gagal di tengah perjalanannya. Keberhasilan mungkin tergantung pada sejumlah faktor termasuk usia, bakat, dan motivasi. Untuk semua alasan ini, banyak orang termasuk banyak ahli bahasa yang mempelajari akuisisi L2 atau bahasa kedua. Mereka percaya bahwa akuisisi bahasa kedua adalah sesuatu yang berbeda dari akuisisi bahasa pertama. Hipotesis ini disebut sebagai hipotesis perbedaan mendasar dari akuisisi L2. In certain important respects, however, L2 acquisition is like L1 acquisition. Like L1ers, L2ers do not acquire their second language overnight. They go through stages like L1ers. L2ers construct grammars. These grammars reflect their competence in the L2 at each stage, and so their language at any particular point, though not native-like, is real governor and no haphazard. The intermediate grammars that L2ers create on their way to the target have been called interlanguage grammars.
Okay, the first material by me is Native Language Influence in L2 Acquisition. One respect in which L1 acquisition and L2 acquisition are clearly different is that adult L2ers already have a fully developed grammar of their first language, as discussed in Chapter 6. Linguistic competence is unconscious knowledge. We cannot phrase our ability to use the rules of our language. We cannot decide not to understand English. Similarly, L2ers, especially at the beginning stage of acquiring their L2, seem to rely on their L1 grammar. To some extent, this is shown by the kind of error L2ers make, which often involve the transfer of grammatical rules from their L1. This is most obvious in phonology. L2ers generally speak with an accent because they may transfer the phonemes, phonological rules, or syllable structure of their first language to their second language. We see this in Japanese speaker who does not distinguish between right and light because their R or L distinction is not phonemic in Japanese. In a French speaker who say the cat in the head because French doesn't have D. The second material is the creative component of L2 equation. It would be an oversimplification to think that L2 equation involve only the transfer of L1 properties to the L2 interlanguage. There is a strong creative component to L2 equation. Many language particular parts of the L1 grammar do not transfer items that are speakers consider irregular, infrequent, or semantically difficult are not likely to transfer to the L2. For example, speaker will not typically transfer L1 idioms such as he hit the roof, meaning he got angry. They are more likely to transfer structure in which the semantic relations are transparent. For example, structures such as will transfer more readily than. For example, the first is, it is awkward to carry this suitcase. The second is, this suitcase is awkward to carry. The last material is, there are a critical period for L2 equation. Age is a significant factor in L2 equation. The younger a person is when exposed to a second language, the more likely she is to achieve native-like competence. In an important study of the effect of age on ultimate attainment in L2 equation, Jacqueline Johnson and Elisa Newport test several groups of Chinese and Korean speakers who had acquired English as a second language. The subject, all of whom had been in the United States for at least 5 years, were tested on their knowledge of specific aspects of English morphology and syntax.